Formula Access, have I got a treat for you today? We've got Dan Jones, who runs power units for Mercedes F1. You guys, this is like the most interesting human being that I've spoken with, who has all sorts of crazy, amazing stories, crazy, amazing hobbies. Like, this guy is what I kind of want to be when I grow up. So seriously, enjoy the show. Listen on. Young drivers, young engineers, young people, anyone, listen, enjoy, have fun. You guys, Dan is an awesome guy. Great show. Want to have him on again. Seriously. Good afternoon, Dan. Thank you for coming here. We are live. I appreciate you pushing aside your busy schedule and making time for us.
Afternoon, Ryan. Evening for me here in the UK. But yeah, good to talk to you. And yeah, apologies for delaying it last week. But yeah, good to finally get online to get this done.
No, all good, all good. I generally start the conversation off and say that we're primarily a US audience, and that has gone from like 60% to like 30%. And so now we have, kind of a very, very spread out and global audience. But just to kind of get started, tell the audience who you are and what you do today and your role.
Okay, so my name's Dan Jones. I'm the team leader for the Power Unit Concept Engineering Group at Mercedes AMG High Performance Powertrains. So I lead the engineering team that's responsible for the big picture architecture decisions and direction for the whole power unit. And typically we're 12 to 18 months ahead of the rest of the engineering teams as we select, sort of evaluate, work through concepts, do some tests to prove that that's the direction to go, and then that gets cascaded down to the rest of the engineering teams. It's changed a little bit in recent times. So with we're racing a homologated power unit now from the start of this season, and we had the 2026 rules formally released in August, but we had a good idea of what was coming on those from the framework document released September last year. And so late February, March, I finished my last project for the power unit that we're racing this year. And me and my team, we moved over to working solely on 2026 facing projects.
So just to educate the audience, when you talk about homologating the engine, just describe what that means, because I know there's always been kind of chatter in the news on tokens and communication about whatnot, but what exactly does that mean in layman's term? So
in 2014, the power unit regulations changed to the V6 hybrid engines that we've been racing since then. And in the first season, there was a token system. So from the initial PU that we raced to race one, you had tokens you could spend that allowed you to put performance upgrades or reliability upgrades on different areas of the power unit. And then that got evolved to being reducing the number of power units per season, but taking away the token system. The number of power units per season ran down over the years from 2014. And for the last number of years, we've been on a limit of 3 power units per season. But we were free to, for every new performance, every new phase, as we call it, every new spec of power unit that we brought in, we were free to have performance updates, reliability updates, whatever we wanted to change, as long as it was rules legal, that was possible. Then COVID happened, and that brought forward by a year, limiting the changes that we could make. So we were only allowed 1 performance update per year. So the first PU that you take to the start of the season to race one, the push over the winter, putting on all the performance that we can, and then the later power unit introductions, you're only allowed to make changes for reliability. Then at the same time, knowing that there's going to be a future set of power unit regulations coming along. The power unit we took to the first race this year, from a performance perspective, that's now frozen for the next this season and all the way through to the end of 2025. So we're now, by regulation, only allowed to make changes that address reliability or reduce cost through these seasons, and that is done deliberately. So until the end of this year, we're not operating under a budget cap on the power unit side. So on the chassis side, they've been operating under the cost cap from last year and through into this year. From 1st of January 2023, power unit manufacturers will also be operating under a cost cap, and so the freezing or limiting the work we can do on the current power unit means we can slowly shift more and more resource over onto developing the future power unit.
So you theoretically, let's just say you have a power unit that's 10 miles an hour down on the straights. That's your engine until 2026.
From a performance perspective, that's locked in. The last time the FIA homologated power units, this was done at the end of the V8 era as well, but it was less heavily regulated and policed by the FIA than it is now. And some of the power unit manufacturers took it as gospel, and others, within the limit of the regulations, which is the whole game of Formula One, within the limit of the rules, pushed it. And so over a number of seasons, you saw that where there was a reasonably close alignment to the power units, the gap got wider. But now the FIA, there's a torque sensor on the car. They can see the output. They've got access to all the other sensors that are on the engine. So they're able to see how the power unit is operating. So we are essentially constrained to the maximum performance level that we took to the start of the race, and it's only reliability and cost down updates from that point forwards.
Wow, that is so amazing that you kind of have this moment in time where if you don't have a title worthy engine, you kind of never will. And I'd give, honestly, before I die, and I might have to do it on my deathbed, I would love to sit in with a design team and just listen how they read and interpret the rules, and and the engineers talking about how from an aero perspective or an engine perspective or chassis perspective, that you get that kind of, I don't know, gray area, if you want to call it that, in motorsports to level up. I'd love to be around that and hear how people work that out.
Yeah, it's a constant evolution, and you're relying on you've got lots of people, the rule book's public, but everyone's got their own interpretation, and in those interpretations you talk through them when there's opportunities. And for the start of the season, it was with knowing it was going to be a frozen spec. It's a very difficult choice of balancing how hard you push for the performance against the reliability. And I think you've seen with some of the other PE manufacturers at the start of the year, they caught up a whole load from where they were relatively in the years before, but they've definitely had their on-track failures this year. But then, having pushed for performance within the scope of the rules, they are allowed to make reliability changes to fix that. But then it has been to the detriment of winning a championship this year. So it's a very, very difficult balance to strike, and for different teams, from kind of where you're coming from as to where to pitch it. And I don't think there's any single right answer. And it's also been power unit performance across the manufacturers has also been heavily clouded this year by the new aero regs coming in. So are we able to say that anyone's clearly got the standout best power unit? Now, probably not. And where we Mercedes were set, at the start of the V6 era, stand out compared to the other manufacturers, and they'd all slowly chipped away and caught up. But we've all got access to the GPS data. You can see how the car performance varies around the track, but trying to separate out what's chassis and what's power unit from that is very difficult to do with a high level of confidence. Yeah, you can infer, but you can't be sure.
You're the only guest to date, and I only have like 4 published now, and I think I have like 12 sitting on my desktop here waiting to be published. You're the only guest to send a bio over, and I have to say I've been looking forward to this more than any other guest at this point, because you are an incredibly interesting person, and it was really neat to see that on paper. And I got it and I was like, oh, okay, it's probably a resume. And then I opened it and I read it, and looking at the pictures, I was like, this is going to be a really good conversation. I'm actually excited for this. So with all that being said, how did you get into motorsport? Like, what's the origin story, and how did this begin?
Goes a long way back. So my whole fascination, interest in how things work. I think I was destined to be an engineer long before I realised it myself. So my dad used to be involved in sort of amateur level motorsport. Used to prepare rally cars himself, and did some competing on that side. Then, as he got married, kids came along. Couldn't really afford to do that. But where some dads take their kids to watch the football or whatever the sport they're interested in. I remember watching, it would have been 1985 probably is the earliest memory of watching Formula One on the television. So it was the Mansell versus Piquet years. Oh. So Williams, but Mansell being there, narrowly missing out on the championships. So there was that interest in Formula One, but rallying and all forms of motorsport, as a kid. And then I was into the science, maths, the right sort of subjects at school. I was always the kind of kid playing with Lego. You get the Lego, you build it to what it is, and you go, oh great, okay, that was fun. Take it all apart, and then just make something that's completely, completely in your head of just that.
So real quick, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine.
It's tinkering, right? For you, it was tinkering with stuff.
It's a bit of wanting to know how something works. So you can have a finished product or something, and it has a function or a series of functions that it does as a finished product. But crack open the lid and what's the combination of how do all the little what are all the parts inside that make it work? Work that way.
If I could turn my camera around, I have a mini bike engine of my son's completely taken apart on a table over here, where he feels like he can extract another 5 or 10 miles an hour out of it. Yeah. And then this morning, you can't see it here, but we've got a window up here. He took the window apart to try to get it to open differently or wider. I guess it gets hot down here, and whatnot. And I came down and I was like, I think the window's open. And I went up there, and he had unscrewed all the screws so it would open wider. It doesn't open all the way, but it was open. And I was like, did you do something with the window? And he was like, I took it apart, and I thought I could, I could adjust the screws and the mounts to get it to open farther, so I could get a bigger breeze in here.
Yeah, it sounds like you got budding engineer in the making there yourself.
Oh, yeah. He comes from a family of engineers, so
yeah,
everything you're saying I catch. So go ahead.
So then going through school in the UK, you have to make your first sort of choices of so I think it's age 12, 13 of what subjects you're going to study at GCSE. So your post-16, exams at 16 years of age. And then, so around that time, you start to get careers discussions and everything else. And, I had an idea that some people could end up going and working and designing Formula One cars or elements of that. But back then, there was no clear route. This is how you get there. But there were clearly were people doing it, but the sport was much smaller. The teams, Now, the championship winning teams would have been 40, 50 people compared to the size they are now. So I haven't gone off to university. I got involved with a competition called Formula Student, which for in the States is Formula SAE, but it's a global initiative. And as well as studying a degree that was focused on motorsport, so it was an automotive engineering degree, but with a motorsport bias. Also got involved with with this competition, and the premise is you design, build, and race a single-seater racing car. It's supposed to be designed for an amateur weekend racer, but it's a fantastic project that for students you get to put into practice everything that you're learning in your lectures in a complex multidisciplinary project. So I got to design chassis and suspension of a car from scratch, be a part of putting all that together, and then because I was the team leader for that and did a lot of the grunt work on there, we came to run it for the first time, and everyone went, "Dan, you're driving it for the first time, not you." So to sit in a car that I've designed, made, and as part of this team, and then push the start button and drive it around for the first time, it's still one of the the proudest moments of my life, with that creation, and going all the way through from rulebook interpretation in your head, designing it on the CAD screen, making it, and then producing it. It's the challenge is not getting too sucked into that, still making sure you do well enough in your exams that you get your good degree mark. But that was really one of the first, as well as the education, that gave me the key experience to be able to get work in a high performance engineering environment. So part of my degree, I did a industrial placement working at Nissan's European Technical Centre. So that was on road cars, on suspension side. And then I went on to do, that kind of led me into doing the suspension on the Formula Student car. But in the UK, the competition's in July. So it's after our academic year's finished. So I'd graduated. We went and did Formula Student, finished second in the UK, 5th overall, which was the best our university had ever done at that point in time. And so came back from the competition, had 2 or 3 days of that whole glow of we did really well, so proud of everything. And then the reality struck of I've got no job, I've got not very much money. And I was so focused on getting my degree and doing Formula Student, I missed the thing of sorting out employment afterwards. But then I was lucky enough I'd met another faculty advisor from another university whilst at Formula Student, who was moving to my university, and I happened to bump into him in the corridor at the uni, and just said to him, "Good to see you again. Don't suppose you know anyone who's looking for engineers? I'm stuck for work at the moment." And he kind of went, "No, sorry, don't know." But then he got a phone call that afternoon from someone who was looking for a suspension engineer role for Bentley Motors. So he phoned me up. I drove off in the car the next day, all the way up to Crewe, other end of the country, had the interview, and managed to secure my first job post university. And that was kind of skipped the graduate recruitment route, and was working on suspension fault fixing on Bentley cars. And I was only there for, I think, 7 or 8 months in the end. It was a contractor role rather than a permanent position. And whilst I was there, again, 2 guys that I'd initially met through Formula Student, John Hilton and Doug Cross, who were at Renault Formula One on the engine side. And not sure if people might not know the story, but it goes back to what we were talking about, the homologated power units. So they'd just celebrated winning their second championship as Renault F1 they were at the time, when the FIA froze the specification of the power unit. So they were spraying the champagne one day, and then literally 2 days later, they all got their Dear John letters saying, "Sorry, there's no job for you anymore."
Was this the 2005-06 run?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay.
It'd have been towards the end of 06. And so they'd been investigating technologies for the KERS regulations that were coming in Formula One in 2009. So it was the first of the hybrid steps, and they passionately believed in one of the technologies they'd been investigating, and so they started a company called Flybrid to develop the technology for Formula One, but with a view to it being developed and adopted in mainstream automotive commercial vehicles. You know, it had applications in lots of areas. And so I happened to see the job advert for this, thought it was interesting, and then I saw a separate magazine article that said that it was John and David started the company, and I joined two and two together, got my job application off to them, and I joined them as, I think, employee number 2 or employee number 3 of what was then a small startup business in May of 2007. And then it was a very, very steep learning curve. They were ex-Formula One engineers, and it was my grounding in the just the way of designing things, the approach of developing things. And I was with that company for just over 10 years, and the company grew and grew and grew. And I started off as a design engineer. I became chief designer, and then became chief engineer. And from what I was from employee number 2 or 3 at its peak, when you got bought out by another company, I was looking after a team of 35 engineers across a number of different products. And I was happy in what I was doing, developing interesting technologies. So it was energy storage using high-speed flywheels. It was working on new stuff rather than a lot of stuff in mainstream automotive it's adapting existing technology, or it's how can we achieve the same for two cents less? Because when you make 100,000 cars or more, if you save 2 cents, it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
but it's not that interesting. It's not creating stuff from scratch. But then out of the blue, I got a phone call from a recruitment agency saying, "Seen your profile on LinkedIn. Think you'd be a good fit for this role at HPP. Are you interested?" And I was like, well, I wasn't really thinking of jumping ship from where I was, but Formula One was part of one of my original dreams, and I was like, hell yeah. So surreptitiously took the day off work, went for the interview, and I have to say the interview was a very technical interview, and it was with 2 of the HPP guys, one who's now left, but one who's now chief engineer on the current Formula One unit product, and it was a 3-hour grilling. It was a proper mental workout, and I came out the other side of it going, think I did well, not sure whether I'd done enough to for them to say yes, please come join us at Mercedes. But thankfully I had done, and so that would have been mid 2017 of the interview. I had to work my notice period at my at Flybrid, and so I started at Mercedes 1st of December 2017. So it's just coming around for my 5-year anniversary in a few weeks' time, which I can't believe it's gone so quickly.
So you've worked your way up through this group, right? You didn't just start at the head of this group. You've been around the engine department.
Yeah, so in the 5 years I've been at HPP, originally you could call it a sideways step or even step down. So I moved from being chief engineer and having a load of direct reports, and then staff under them. We're within that engineering group, and I moved across to be a mechanical engineer, back doing the design. And at the time I was looking after the part of the bottom end team, and I was looking after the crankcase and the water system on the F1 power unit. But then I think having had the prior experience of managing teams of engineers and being a bit more experienced hire coming in, within 9-10 months I'd secured a promotion to team leader. I looked after the top end of the engine for a very short period of time, but then with some staff moves I went back to bottom end where I'd started at HPP. Spent trying to think, maybe 15-16 months as the team leader on the bottom end side, and then moved. We had a reshuffle internally, and then I moved across to looking after the turbo for nearly 2 years, and that was really good for me because the when I moved to HPP, engines from the design side were new to me. As a petrol head, and just that engineering me, I had a good idea how they worked and was just a general interest, but I'd never designed actual engine components, let alone for, high performance for Formula One. So there was a steep learning curve on that side when I started at HPP. And the turbo, there's a lot of parallels to the high-speed flywheels I was working on before. So that helped me lean on more of my prior experience. But yeah, spent a good fun nearly 2 years looking after the turbo. And then your viewers might know that there's been a few people moved from Mercedes to Red Bull powertrains when they set up their division, and so that created some openings and opportunities when those people chose to leave. And I was delighted. I wasn't expecting it. I was at home doing some work on uni work, so I'm doing a part-time master's degree at the same time at the moment. And I was at home working on a module for that, and the one of the heads of department phoned me up and said, "Oh, would you be interested in doing moving to the concept engineering role?" And it kind of blindsided me at the time because I was like focused on the studies, and I was still into on the turbo side of things. And I said to him, I'll have to think about it and call you back." And then he put the phone down. I kind of went, "Well, there's no negatives in this phone." I went, "Yeah, I'd love to." So that was May. That'd have been May 21 that I moved across to the concept role. And so that is where my previous team leader roles, you're directly responsible for an area of the engine as it is broken down. The whole power unit, we split into the different engineering teams. But so now the concept engineering role is whole of power unit, and it's the early stages, the broader, bigger picture decisions before you then would. So we might be investigating something on how we think is the best layout for the new turbo that will then get cascaded down to the person who's leading the turbo team now instead of me.
What is it about? I mean, I guess this could apply anywhere within the team, but what are those qualities and attributes that the team looks for when kind of moving you around? Is the reshuffle, is that to get a fresh mind in an area, to kind of get fresh eyes on it, fresh ideas, or are you being moved around for whatever, like for people that are maybe outside of the team trying to get in the team? Like, what are these traits that the team is looking for to really bring them in?
I think sometimes it's a matter of extenuating circumstances outside of your control. So like we said, with the people recently departing to go off to Red Bull powertrains, and that creates opportunities, or the need to restructure. And other times it's exactly as you say, for to get fresh ideas or a fresh approach in. You don't want to move people around too often, because people never get the chance to kind of get their feet under the table to properly understand the product or the area they're responsible for, and really be able to get their teeth into it and develop it well. But then at the same time, I had started to think, after 2 years on the turbo, so what's next? And I was starting to think about what the next move might be for me. But then it came along, it was presented to me before I had to kind of go and have the conversation again. I'd quite like to go and try one of the other areas, please.
Did you call him back before you completely hung up the phone, or?
Oh, no, it was I'll call you back I need to think about it for a little bit, but I'll call you back. But it didn't take much thinking about at all.
I need to stop clapping and getting really excited before I call you back calm. Sure. Yeah, I think I can take this. So in your role now, you're looking at the 2026 engine rules, and you're looking at the engine as a whole, coming up with the concepts. And I don't want to get too like, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I think I read an article about the placement of the turbo on the engine for the 2014 rules. If I've got my dates right, it was the placement of the turbo on the engine that made it such a beast of an engine relative to the rest of the field. This is the kind of stuff that you're doing today.
Yeah, and I think so. That was it. It was one of the key differences back in 2014 of the split turbo layout of having the turbine at the rear of the V and the compressor at the front. But I think these days, when it's been like for a long time in Formula One and in lots of other sports where there's that, so like in cycling, they talk about it's all incremental gains, and so that splitting the turbo was had its advantages, allowed certain things, but then it's also allows incremental gains in other areas. But it also had some negatives compared to another turbo. So everything in engineering is a compromise. Mm-hmm. You can't have, as a road car, you can't have the highest performance car, the fastest accelerating, the most grippy around the corners, but at the same time is the most fuel efficient and the cheapest to produce. So you're having to everything is engineered against a target that you think you're aiming for. You've got constraints upon you that are the regulations, and then it's within for us to try and work out where are the maximum opportunities to deliver performance that hopefully differentiate us from our competitors.
Do you ever take an engine concept and hand it down and they're like, no, like this isn't going to work, or change something up? I mean, is it that, or is it are they brought up to look at it and then you kind of hand it off to that?
It's highly collaborative, and you do lots of stuff in design studies, and then you'll choose a direction of stuff that you're going to produce to actually go and test. And some stuff works, some stuff doesn't, and you look. But even when stuff doesn't go the way you expect, understanding why it didn't work the way you expected, digging into that is you just constantly ask why until you can stop asking why, and from that you learn stuff that gives you ideas to then go on for other directions.
How much can you do on a computer? Like, for example, I've had a couple of people from the Formula One esports teams, and they'll have their drivers just completely just work a track, try corners, try, zones, acceleration, braking and whatnot, and then take that data to the road, to the track team. How much of what you do can actually be tested on a computer? I mean, what is the how can you see the fruits of your efforts within the process?
So the software tools that are available now to us as engineers across the whole sort of product development area are fantastic, and they continue to develop, and they're a massive part of what we do and how we develop. But ultimately, they are only an approximation of the real world, and you can do some things that are quick and dirty to give you a feel for a direction to go, but then you get to a point where you'd have to be spending so much effort to refine the answer in simulation that's you're better off making hardware and testing it to a certain point. But what you can achieve with the tools these days is phenomenal. What's very important, and this for any budding young engineers out there, you have to, every simulation is an approximation, or everything that you're doing in the virtual world, you have to validate it, you have to correlate your models, and until you've done that, it might be telling you a trend, but you don't know if it's true or not. You have to have that check against reality. But then what you're talking about for driver development on the track and investigating setups, different ways of running things, the advantages you have in the virtual world is You don't have tire degradation if you don't want to. You don't have variable ambient conditions. So you can take out a lot of the variables you have when you be testing in the real world, to narrow down on things to go and say, yeah, I'm sure that this change in behavior that I'm seeing is because of this, and not having it clouded by what will be like just noise, natural noise in the system as you get in the real world. So there's a place for all aspects of it, and striking the balance between how much you do virtually to then, before you commit to spending that time to manufacture, assemble and test something, is there's never the perfect answer, but it's something you have to evolve all the time and try and think of when is the right time to commit to producing it and testing it.
I think something that fascinates me about Formula One and even any motorsport engineering team is those variables that you have to account for: new tracks, weather, rain, sunlight, clouds. My son karts, and you could have it perfectly set up, and then the clouds come out, and the temperature decreases, and now your whole setup is wrong, or the opposite takes place. I mean, do the variables help you or hurt you? I mean, how do you build an engine for, a track like Monza versus Monaco?
So I think on the engine side, it's a bit easier than on the chassis engineering side, because you'll have an idea of, you'll get a prediction of the car performance, you'll run simulations of how the car is going to perform around the lap, and then from that you can establish targets for the engine, develop strategies around there. And then in how we operate the engine in the particular like the Monza, lots of full throttle time versus Monaco, as you're saying, very low full throttle time. But very, very important on drivability and things like that. And it's not Lowe's hairpin anymore, but it's always Lowe's hairpin in my head, whatever they call it. That tight hairpin, that's the lowest engine speed corner of the year. So when you're looking at the outlying elements that you're specing your engine and your gearbox to work to, those are the things you've got to factor in and consider. But they are, will design for expected maximum ambient conditions. But again, that's more on the chassis side of, we tell them how the power unit is going to perform. So you've got this much, this is the cooling requirement when it's operated this way, and then it's for the chassis team to come up with the most efficient way of providing that cooling at the lowest aero drag penalty on the car. So it's still definitely causes us headaches or surprises sometimes on the PU side, but it's much more difficult for those guys with vagaries of tires and making sure they've got the right cooling setup on the car.
When you're in design, I'm trying to kind of paint a picture for the drivers. Are the drivers involved in these design concepts? I remember back in 2021 when there was a huge driver change across the grid, and you had Ricardo coming from a Renault to a Mercedes engine. You had Sainz going from, I think at the time, a Renault to a Ferrari, and just I think you had Alonso coming into the sport at that time, and how long it took the driver to kind of understand, I don't want to butcher the terminology, like power lag, going into and out of a corner, and how you kind of manage the throttle through that.
So every driver's got their own sort of preferences for, so you have a map of torque delivered versus pedal position, and you can change the shape of that response curve. So rather than just have a straight line response of torque versus pedal position, you can have something where however they like to drive it. So that sort of stuff you can tune, but then within that, every power unit has got its own characteristics for how it's been developed. They are so yeah, unique prototypes that only 2 or 3 drivers of each. Well, with customers, it might be 8, 9 drivers, but only get to drive each type. So yeah, and there are fundamental differences in architecture, philosophy, in how it's operated between the different manufacturers. So yeah, for the drivers moving teams and having to drive with a different power unit, it can take them a little while to familiarize themselves with how to get the best performance out of that power unit, and how to adapt their driving style to work with that.
Do the cars deal with turbo lag anymore? I mean, is that a thing with all the electric power in the car?
So with the current regulations, with the MGUH, turbo lag's not a thing. So it's you've got that electric machine that's sat between the turbine and the compressor, and essentially it's air on demand. So the driver puts his foot to a throttle position. That means it needs this much air going into the engine for that particular torque demand. And if there's not enough energy coming from the exhaust gases powering the turbine itself to get you there, then almost instantaneously you're there on the boost demand from the compressor, which is why the MGUH being removed from the 2026 regs is one of the big headaches that we're all facing. Is so having spent the last since 2014 working on turbocharged engines, but with the MGUH, to kind of lose that technology, going back to a more conventional turbo, presents its challenges.
When you guys have a customer team, I mean, you're kind of the parent here, the manufacturer. Or are your customer teams involved in kind of the design process, or is it kind of like going to Walmart and it's like, I need an engine, and you give them 3 and it's done?
So we exist as an entity as Mercedes HPP, to win races and world championships for Mercedes. But as part of that, having customers who are using our engines along the way is also an important part of that. But so the design decisions about how to integrate the power unit into the car, that's all completely driven from the works team from that side. If we can accommodate requests from the customers at the same time as doing that at no detriment to the works team, then it'll be done. But generally otherwise it would be, we work out what it's going to be for that particular year for the power unit of what the works install is, and then that information gets shared with the customer team, so they know what they need to design their car around.
So a customer team essentially builds a car around your engine versus like, here's our design concept for the chassis, and the aero, and I need you to kind of fit the engine inside of there, versus, we need your engine specs so we can kind of wrap a Formula One car around it.
Yeah, and that's the advantage that Mercedes Grand Prix, Ferrari, Red Bull, when they had the partnership with Honda, and now on the as they move to Red Bull powertrain. So it allows you to have the best integrated product of the two together, and to try and make those, limit the compromises to have the fastest race car possible.
How involved are you in the track team? I know you're working in the future, they're kind of working today. How involved are you at the track, or kind of in the live stream of data coming in, or the team principals or drivers?
So on the concept engineering role now, very little. So I was looking after the turbo and the bottom end before. Then if there were any issues from the track during a particular race that required engineering support in my area, then the phone call would come through to me, and either I'd be trying to help go through the data, understand, give advice, or call one of my engineers to come in and support, because they know it in the detail. It's their component. But it's more so in my role now, engagement with the trackside engineers is more about making sure that we don't make design decisions that make it fundamentally difficult to operate at the trackside, or we've got ever reducing hours that they're allowed to be at the circuit. So there were some requests coming from the trackside guys of, we need to be able to do this servicing time in X hours rather than the Y hours it takes at the moment. So having those sort of requests coming in, and trying to make sure that we accommodate those as much as possible. And then we might have some ideas of, if we did this, it would allow us to do this for performance or for cost saving, reliability, whatever the reason to do it from a design perspective. But then there's the people you can go and talk to on the trackside and go, thinking about doing this might cause you a problem here. What do you think? And sometimes they go, that's fine. Well, we can work around that. Understand why you want to do it. It makes us go quicker. And other times they just go, absolutely not. We can't operate at the track like that. So it's not regular, but it's that the link and the discussion, the people to talk to are there if required.
From a pressure or just a personal standpoint, the unlimited testing of, I don't know, the early 2000s or late 90s to the heavily restricted time, do you feel like there's more pressure now or like back then? I think $1 billion budget versus a cost cap, it's maybe a different kind of pressure. But is there a preference as the team to?
So my time working in Formula One has always been under a with the limited number or limited introductions of the engine. So even the shift from when I first joined HPP to now, it's been ever more stringent in terms of it's changed how we operate, and it's forced us to be better, more efficient in different areas. And it's to say, well, I suppose when it was unlimited budget, no constraints, it was about who could spend money the fastest in the right areas to go quickest. It was an ultimate arms race. It's like back to the Cold War of America versus Russia. spend to get that advantage.
But I mean, the pressure still exists. I mean, if you have a blank checkbook, you still have to deliver results.
Absolutely. And there's in the history, in the 2000s, you look at Toyota, they came in and spent an absolute fortune, and they're a prime example of, you can have all the budget in the world, but if you don't spend it in the right area, you're not guaranteed to win.
So in your current role, you get to enjoy the race. You can turn it on, watch it, and you're not on call or at the track working.
Yeah, it was a very different from watching the races when I was a team leader on current products to moving over to the concept role. It's still a different experience watching the races to before, when I was just a fan, and I've might support a particular driver or team, and now there's still that vested interest of wanting to see our team do well and everything else. But it's still not nice to see one of our cars, powered by one of our power units, stop at the side of the track with a power unit problem. But it's my heart rate doesn't go up as much as it used to, because I know that it's not going to be me getting the phone call potentially if it could have been one of my parts that's gone wrong.
So with that being said, just for the audience again, please stay out of anything proprietary, but the 2026 engine rule change, like fundamentally, what is happening with that from a power unit perspective?
So the main changes on the power unit side are, there's twofold on the target on the regulations on the FIA side. So they wanted to get other manufacturers interested, but to maintain a level of performance to today, but also to keep the technology relevant to road cars, and for what manufacturers such as Mercedes and the other OEMs are, have an interest in developing and marketing, to keep the number of to keep everyone involved. And so from the current power unit regulations that we're racing, which is V6 hybrid, 120 kilowatt MGUK, and the heat recovery on the turbo with the MGUH. So you'll hear the commentators in the races saying 1,000 horsepower. So everything turned up. Combination of the engine and the hybrid system. So that total 1,000 horsepower. The target 2026 is to maintain the same with that, but where it's roughly 70-30 engine versus hybrid on the current regs, then that's shifting to 50-50.
Wow.
And so the MGUK will increase in maximum power from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts. And the maximum power output of the engine is going to be reduced by limiting the, well, it's currently a fuel flow limit that we have. Mm-hmm. We're also there's also moving to a fully sustainable fuel, and it's going to be now regulated as an energy flow limit rather than a fuel flow limit. It'll still be controlled and monitored by fuel flow, but the sustainable fuel, it has less energy per litre or kilogram of that fuel. And between the different fuel and lubricant suppliers, there'll be a different calorific value of that fuel. So there'll be a declared calorific value, and you'll have your fuel flow to achieve that energy flow target. But roughly, it's about 70% of the current fuel flow to reduce the power of the engine. You'll get the increase in power on the MGK side to achieve the same total combined power output. But then it was talked about to help get newcomers to come in. The other large change of that is that the MGUH is removed, so it goes back to a more conventional turbocharger arrangement, which, as we spoke about a little bit earlier on, is going to give us all of the power unit manufacturers some new challenges of trying to maintain the drivability that we have today with that technology. So I think from our side, probably all of the existing PU manufacturers, it's a backward step in terms of technology, but it's understandable of why the FIA were pushing for that, to save on the total cost of the power unit and on kind of the barrier to entry for newcomers to develop. So
I think it's an important move to bring other options in. I'm a huge proponent of the 11th or the 12th team to come into the sport. Me personally, it's just for seats, and personalities that are wanting to enter the sport. But I do think that the new model is, as much as I'd love to see a V12 come back, and hear that sound again. My son and I will watch old races on here all the time, or if he jumps in his sim, he's always racing like an old Senna McLaren or or whatnot, just because he loves this. I love the sound too, but I do think that Formula One has just created a monster of a business model, which is why you're seeing this flurry of interest into the sport. It's like, wow, I can actually enter a team and make money and not light it all on fire. And
I think as a whole global community, the pandemic and everything we lived through, there's still consequences for everyone as a result of that, and it's been a strange couple of years for everybody. But in many ways, it's been good for Formula One, because what that forced the FIA and Liberty to do at the start of 2020 to make sure it survived as a sport was to bring forward a lot of the discussions of how to reduce costs, both on the chassis and on the power unit side. And I think it made more of there's always politics between different teams and different areas, but I think it made it easier with everyone being in that scenario of, so you had the non-manufacturers, road car manufacturer back teams struggling for money because their sponsorship of where they're coming from, and then at the same time no one was producing cars or selling cars, so all the car manufacturers had a tough time in terms of managing cash flow and everything else. So there were commercial pressures from all areas that made it easier to push through and get agreement on that glide path down to where we have been from the start of the season on operating on the cost cap on the chassis side.
And you're over recruiting in your group as well. I mean, you and I had just a brief conversation before we got started about that. When you're looking, and let me take a step back here. If I'm an 18-year-old and I am in college and pursuing a degree in engineering, if I have 4 years or 3 years to kind of hone certain skills, what are you looking for when you're recruiting engineers to enter the pinnacle of motorsport?
It's a spread of many different attributes. So you do need to be an excellent engineer on the technical skills, but I've worked with or studied with people who were amazing on the textbook side of things, but if you can't apply that into practical real world applications, then go be a scientist or a researcher. Formula One or other product type industries aren't for you. But then I think that applies in lots of different areas of being very good on the first principles physics, understanding of how things operate, why things work, and material selection, the broad range across engineering. But then it's competitive, team-based, and people need to do something to differentiate themselves from all the other applicants. And so getting involved in something like Formula Student, Formula SAE, that's developing engineering components or whole products in really, really tight timescales is exactly what we do in Formula One. And Formula One is very much like Formula Student, just with much larger budgets and slightly more pressure. But the principle is the same. And so Formula SAE, Formula Student have now grown to such an extent that you'll get lots of CVs come through and you'll see people go on there and go, it's almost like to tick the box to say that they've done it. But you know the difference between the people who went along, got the t-shirt and turned up 1 in every 10 meetings just to get the kind of the bit in the CV, and those who actually lived, breathed it, designed all the parts, did the testing, went to the competition. And even if you don't manage to spot that on the CV initially, if they get to you in front of you an interview and you say, so tell me what you did. Okay, so I designed widget A on the car. Okay, really? How did you design it like that? Why did you design it like that? And if they haven't got that depth, then they get found out really quickly.
So is storytelling a good trait? Like if I can tell you a story of how, I was in charge of the suspension for my car, and and this is the design logic that I had, why I chose it. Here are some of the things we had to work through, and here's how we solved them.
Yeah, I think being a good communicator is very important, but it does have to be grounded from truth. It doesn't necessarily have to be there. So if you can convey a complex topic, in a short summary for that initial introduction, that's a skill in itself. To learn. But in how the students are judged at the competition, it's not just how quick is the car. There are judging sessions where we dig into So why did you do that? How did you do that? And we're scoring them on their engineering understanding and reasoning for, why did you do it, as much as what the perceived quality of what they're presenting in front of you. But it's there's lots of other additional extracurricular activities that you can do. There's unmanned aerial vehicles in the States. So the SAE, they do Formula Baja, snowmobiles. There's all sorts of projects like that, but it's where you get to demonstrate to a prospective employer that you understand the engineering, but you're able to employ that in a practical application, and take an idea, develop something, and there's all the stuff you can get taught in the classroom, but there's only X number of years, and they can't teach you a lot of the practical stuff of how do you design a bearing to go on a shaft? How do you choose how big a bearing is? And there's lots of the practical engineering aspects that you get to learn through doing things like forming a student, that otherwise you have to either have been the kind of person, like you're saying about your son, who's taken the engine apart just to make it better. If you have the opportunity to do that when you're growing up, that doing stuff like that, making sure you actually understand how things work, is like I was saying earlier on. It's the thing, an engine as a whole engine, it's got its top level functions of what it needs to do, but there's literally thousands of components that make up the different sub-assemblies and different subsystems of that for it to operate as a whole engine. So that curiosity, digging in deep and going, okay, so it does that, but why does it do that? Open the lid, find out, go down. Okay, so that bit does that, but why does it do that? And eventually you'll get down to every raw nut and bolt.
There was I've been a fan for Formula One for a long time, and you hear about reliability, you hear about performance, you hear just kind of this really high level just challenges that teams struggle through, and during last year or the year before, my son got into remote control cars, and it's like, okay, he has a remote control car, and of course then it was like, I need it to be faster and I needed it to handle better, and and he's talking the lingo that you're talking right now, and it like all things started to click for me when he would start doing this, and he'd put a bigger engine in it and it would shred out the drivetrain when he did that, and then he would get a different components, stronger materials, and and then he would change something else and it would completely blow that out, and it really kind of helped me understand this kind of cascade effect of performance versus reliability that you run into, from even an engine standpoint, or how an engine affects the chassis as well, and the driver to a degree. It's amazing the sheer amount of cascade domino effect that goes into your job. Yeah, I mean, your engine affects everything, and everything affects your engine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from those very high level requirements, or of how the PU operates, so we spoke about 1,000 horsepower total power output, but how that cascades through, and it does really go down to how do you size every single nut, bolt, washer, seal, in products where the total mass of it isn't so important, or the consequences of a failure aren't so high. Then they'll reach a point where you don't engineer certain things. You'll just go rules of thumb, or you might buy an off-the-shelf item that does part of that. But Formula One and other areas of high performance engineering really are about that attention to detail, and making sure that any part that's on there is there for a reason, and it's only just as as heavy or as performant as it needs to be, because anything else is, you're either wasting mass or wasting cost, or that you could be putting more performance or more reliability elsewhere on the power unit. But then on the flip side, if you get that wrong, even on one of the simplest of components, it can be a component that costs, a couple of pounds, a couple of dollars. And it can be something that has gone wrong on such a simple component like that can have a knock-on consequence. That means you stop on the side of the track with smoke billowing out. It's the
with that. So I understand when you're looking at candidates and you have, what is your technical acumen, what is your ability to problem solve, what is your imagination. But I think there's something I think most fans can kind of wrap their arms around that is everywhere in Formula One is pressure. And I talk about this actually in a lot of my episodes because I love pressure. I thrive in pressure. And so, I watch Drive to Survive and, you're watching tempers flare and pressure just everywhere. I'm like, I got to be in this world, and how do you find that in a candidate? The fortitude to thrive under pressure, come alive, because you're not a commercial corporation that's trying to achieve like quarterly revenue numbers or annual revenue numbers. Like you're trying to win a race, which is fast paced, high pressure, nonstop for 10 months out of the year, or probably 12. I mean, you probably don't stop working.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to check for at that interview level, and there are there are plenty of people who come in who've got the right skills, they've got the right desire to work in it, but they might work in the industry for 18 months, 2 years, and they just go, I'm done, I've had enough. Yeah, I've ticked the box, I've done it, but I'm going to move on and do something else. I think you have to love it. And then if you love it, I mean, it's different. It's different for everybody else of how you cope under pressure, how you respond to pressure. But just generally, if you're someone who's got a passion for the sport or for high performance engineering in general, and then if people have got those abilities, you just get to the point where we go, we're talking about worrying about, oh no, is it my problem that's gone wrong? If you get the phone call when something stops at the side of the track, but you get to the point where you've got faith in your abilities and you go, well, damn, it's bad that it's happened, but we'll solve it. We'll investigate, we'll work out what went wrong and we'll fix it and we'll move on to the next thing. But until you've been through that cycle a few times yourself, it's the first few times, it's you feel the pressure the most when the spotlight is on you or your team who are going, what are you doing to fix it? And the Formula One, well, HPP and most of the other manufacturers, I'm sure it's the same. They're engineering-led organisations first and foremost. So we do have budget limits, we do have everything else, but whereas other like you're saying about you've got to operate to certain targets each quarter for turnover or something like that. It's just the dials turned up to 11 on the engineering side and slightly down in the other areas compared to different organizations. So what that's great is that means if you go, I've got this idea of how I'm going to make the power unit go quicker or to fix this. I've had instances where, right, we need to do this, but it's going to need some magic to make it happen. And purchasing, manufacturing, the rest of the business, they work miracles, and you go from idea to having something the solution to a problem, sometimes in hours, if it's possible, sometimes days where you'd think it normally take weeks. And it's that's one of the great things about working on Formula One. But then at the same time, that flips around to when something does go wrong, then it's you have got that rest of that whole the different arms of the business going, engineering, what are we doing? What are we doing to fix it? We're going racing again in a week's time. We need to do this by then. So we need an answer of what we're going to do to that time. So that's when it kind of flips round of the pressure on the other side.
What's been your pinch me moment in Formula One? Obviously, you grew up as a fan of the sport. Now you're in it. At what point were you like, I can't believe I'm here?
good question. Interesting to say. I think I had my first real pinch me moment like that before I got to Formula One. So when I was working at Flybridge, we developed the first ever hybrid system to successfully race at Le Mans. So Penos tried to do an electric hybrid, I think in the 90s, but it never got through scrutineering or to race. And then when LMP1 hybrid regulations came in, we developed a flywheel based hybrid product for Le Mans, and went racing with a customer team a year before Toyota and Audi arrived with their hybrid systems on their cars. And I mean, the budget was tiny compared to what the works teams would do, but it was. I wasn't there supporting on the track side. We had the people who was actually running the unit there. But so I went over with my dad and my brother, and watching their track side and seeing the car go round, and knowing that I'd designed probably 70-80% of the elements in that hybrid system, and a massive sense of pride in feeling that, but also the sense of pressure of well, if something goes wrong on that, it's probably something that I've designed that's gone wrong. And it's kind of it'd been a hell of a year getting to that point of going racing with it, and it didn't really sink in until I did see that car going actually around on track for the first time, and it kind of crystallized everything you've been working on the CAD screen, you've seen it on the dyno whilst you were testing and developing, but seeing the fruits of the labor actually there in action. And I think so on the Formula One side, it was probably similar. I've got lots of friends who are into Formula One, but they're not engineers, or they might be engineers but in other areas. And it come over, watching a race for the first time when it was, I'd actually been working at Mercedes for a while, and then they just turned to me and went, "Damn, that car's going around a large part because of some stuff that you've done on there." And I was going, yeah. And the numbers of people involved to send 2 cars go racing per year is phenomenal. To go racing with 2 cars 23 times a year, the number of people involved to do that, and it's a huge team sport, and no single one person can take credit for well, every one of those nearly over 1,000 people at Mercedes between Brixworth and Brackley, everyone's played their part in those cars going around and racing. But being so involved on the engineering side, and it might be as you could say, I can't tell you what, but there's a performance update that's gone on for that race. It was something that my team was working on, and being able to, if you got pole position by 10 milliseconds, and you knew that the performance update that you put on for that race was 15 milliseconds, but there'll have been plenty of other people within HPP, their bit would have done 20 milliseconds or something like that. But still, if you hadn't have delivered that part collectively, we would have fallen short of the difference that between pole or second. So it's that everyone plays their part, but everyone can also, it's a collective team effort, but everyone can point to the part that they're playing in that what cog they are in that massive engineering machine to go racing.
That is truly the purpose of this show. I probably for a year I wanted to do this, and because it's way easier to have a conversation with somebody than it is to write like blog style writing, because then it's like there's grammar, there's all this stuff. I just have a conversation with somebody and I record it, and then I send it off to the marketing company, and they do what they do, and I don't have tons of work to do. But I was trackside earlier this year, and I was sitting in the grandstands with the mom of a driver, and then a bunch of people that had worked kind of in engineering and support areas, and like the stories that they were telling this whole weekend that we were at a race was like, this is what I want to talk about. That it's like people like you that deliver pole position by, a millisecond. It's truly fascinating to fans. And I think that's ultimately why Drive to Survive has been so popular, is people like drama. But I also think that it's the first time that fans have been able to like peek inside of the sport and connect with people. And
Yeah, I think it's introduced it to a whole new audience of people who weren't necessarily naturally Formula One fans.
oh yeah,
Yeah, lots of people had the perception of, well, why do I want to watch cars go around 70 times and allegedly it's a race? I think it's I mean, they do overly dramatize some bits on the Drive to Survive thing versus reality. Kind of when you're insider and so I think there's been a habit of Mercedes being filmed by the Netflix guys having bad races whenever we were filmed. So we had there was the Nürburgring when we had the special livery and all sorts of stuff went wrong and things on that side. But so working inside of it, the things that actually happened or went wrong, and then you see how it's portrayed and go, okay, I understand why you've done that to kind of make a TV program out of it. They are bending the truth. They're not lying, but they're bending the truth to make a story out of it. But what's great is it has introduced to a whole new audience, and I think it's helped Formula One get a footing back in America. So I remember probably the dark days of that race at Indianapolis when the Michelin had the tire problem and it ended up as only the 6 Bridgestone cars going around. Just I'm home watch man's going. What's going on? And at the time that was the death knell for Formula One in the States.
True story. So I started watching Formula One and at the end of the 2004 season, and so in that 2007 season, my wife and I, I think my son had just been born, and it was like a weekend opportunity to kind of get away. And I was like, I really want to go see Schumacher before he retires. And, it'd be really great. And then out of nowhere, I think one of my wife's coworkers called and said, "Hey, I can't get to the Indy race. Can you guys want the tickets?" And I was like, "Yes, let's do it." And we're working logistics, trying to figure out how to get there. And something came up with babysitting or something, or just the weather was getting really bad or something. I don't remember the story, but we ended up not going. And so we sat down to watch this, and it was just like, as we sat down, all the cars are coming around the formation lap, and then all the Michelin cars pull off into the pits, and it's just like, wow, I am so glad we didn't drive all the way out there.
Especially if you'd only gone for the race, and if you're going for the weekend, you still would have got to see practice and quali. And for people back in Europe, probably who were followers of Formula One, you knew that was coming before it happened, just because there has been the loggerhead on the politics, and there was the refusing to. All they needed to do was to put a chicane in partway around the banking, so they weren't going that high speed around the banking. But the 6 Bridgestone shod teams, or not all of them, would agree to it. So it ended up in that debacle. But I think you're saying about going trackside for your viewers, if they have only come to Formula One from Drive to Survive. Television coverage, it's great. You get to see the whole race and the action and everything else. But get yourself to a racetrack and go and actually seeing what these cars can do in reality. You need to go to the right corners. So at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, if it's Formula One, if it's sports cars or something like that, the first place I'll always go and watch is on the Maggots and Beckett's complex. It's where they've been flat out after the Copse right-hander. And in a Formula One car, they don't lift on the left, they don't lift on the right, and then they just lift for the left-hander after that. And you're looking at it's a significant corner, but the downforce that they generate and 5G cornering going through there. But there's a gap in the safety fencing where they overlap for the marshals to get through. And if you get there early enough at the right time, you can look right down through the gap in the safety fencing, and you're the car arrives over your right hand shoulder at 200 miles an hour, and it comes across, and then you just the lateral acceleration as it then changes direction and then changes direction left again. It's phenomenal, and you just don't get to see that on the television.
Yeah, we're headed to Austin next week. So on Thursday, we hop in the car and drive down to Austin and catch the race and get some content. It'll kind of be more work for me than normal, but I've actually had some really great conversations with people on the show, and so I'll be able to meet some of the people that I've talked to, like I've talked to you at the actual race, and meet them in person. So it'll be a neat experience to do that. I've actually never been to a Formula One race. I've been to an IndyCar race before, but yeah, earlier my wife's like, you just go.
Yeah,
you're such a fan, like just go. And I'm like, I know, but like, do you see what I have here? Like, I have all the data, the live stream, and then track position. Like I mean, I'm like at the pit wall in my living room here. It's
Austin's a great track though. So like I was saying about the Beckett's complex at Silverstone. So after you've got the uphill left-hander at Austin, you then got that sequence of right lefts at the start of the lap, and the cornering performance through there is I've not been there, so I don't know what the spectating opportunities are like compared to that gap in the fence at Silverstone. But if you can find the right place where you can see the performance of the cars. And the other thing to do is go to one of the big braking zones. So at the end of the long straight at Austin, where they're going into that tight left-hander, you can wander around there, and then you actually look inside on, and you see where the cars brake and how much speed they shed off in that short period of time. And I think, compared to Indy cars are high performance cars, but I think someone did an overlay 2 or 3 years ago of the IndyCar versus an F1 car lap, and an F1 car is like 30 seconds, 40 seconds quicker than an IndyCar
right.
around. And an IndyCar is not slow.
Yeah, I think I saw somebody on YouTube, I think, did a side by side of that. Yes, I completely agree. So you're also a judge. You have all these great hobbies as well as this amazing career in Formula One. You're also a judge for Formula Student, right?
Yeah. So as I spoke about before, I did that as a student at university, and then I loved it so much I kind of missed it and got involved as a volunteer straight afterwards. And so spent some time design judging and as a scrutineer, but I now help organise and run the event in the UK. So since, I'm trying to think, 2019, I've been chief judge for the UK event, and we have a committee of probably 15 to 20 people, all responsible for different areas of the competition. So and the vast majority of them are volunteers, so people like myself working in industry in different areas, and it's a big time commitment, over and above the career, but every year, I wouldn't be doing what I am now without the skills and experience that Formula Student gave me. And so, it's one of my parts of giving back, and it's great to see what the students bring each year, to be part of developing that new talent for the future, both just personally as an interest, just as just being passionate about engineering being a good career, and in general. But then also with my Mercedes hat on, I get to talent spot some of the best people coming through. And so Mercedes are a sponsor of Formula Student, and we go there actively recruiting. But as the chief judge, I get access to some of the teams that it's an advantage that not everyone gets, and so I can do that tap on the shoulder and go, make sure you go and apply over there to try and get them through the door. So
I was just going to ask you, I was like, do you keep a business card in your pocket when you run across that person with that spark, that they have something, you're like, Give me a call when you're done with this.
Yeah, so we do have fast track interviews for that talent like that we spot, and it's kind of it gives them a chance to guaranteed get through the door interview rather than having to go get through the CV sift, because we do have tens of thousands of applications each year.
Man, and then book author. In addition to that, you're also a writer.
Contributing author, it's a chapter in a book. I can't claim to be a whole author, but again, that's on the Formula student side. So one of the senior scrutineers is US based, Michael Royce, and his wife Suzanne Royce. Again, I met them. They scrutineered my car when I competed back in 2006. But then they've been helping out competitions all around the world, Formula SE, Formula Student. And so then when I got back involved on the organising side and in the scrutineering side, got to know Michael and Suzanne well through doing that. And they were started writing a book to try and pull together all the different skills and areas that you need in Formula Student to do well. And so I was honoured that Michael asked me to write a chapter to contribute to that book, and saying that was probably my first publication, formal publication as an engineer. But again, it's that part of passing on the knowledge and trying to help the teams. I think it's very easy for teams to knowledge transfer in general, in the business world, in engineering in particular, of making sure you've got the right information being passed to the right people at the right time, and you're not forgetting the lessons that you learned, you've learned before. It's important for everything. But on the Formula SE, Formula Student side, lots of the time you'll see the same mistakes the next year or the year after, and it's the teams that do the knowledge transfer well, or go and go and find those resources, that mean that someone's telling me that I shouldn't be doing it this way because they've made that mistake before. But it's putting down into print a lot of the things to get them to a base minimum level to ease that journey into being competitive.
And this leads me into my next topic. You're also a DJ, right? With electronic music?
Yeah, so that's a hobby interest. So started doing, I bought my first set of decks when I was 18, so now far too long ago. But good number of years ago. And for me, I like most forms of music, but particularly at the electronic music on that side, and on the DJing side. And for me, music is it's one of the ways of relaxing, winding down, but at the same time you can use it for motivation. And it never ceases to amaze me how you can change someone's mood just by putting the right piece of music on.
So I too am a huge fan of EDM, electric dance, whatever, and I've got surround sound on the TV, so when I'm working, I have just surround sound blaring. And you're right. I mean, first off, if there's no words, it's not distracting. If I'm trying to write or respond to emails or think through something, but it's also very motivating and or calming and what you're doing. I have a board member who's also a big EDM guy, and anytime him or I are stressed out or trying to do something, he'll send me some mix and be like, just put your headphones on and listen to this mix. And
I think the starting out, I was learning on proper turntables with vinyl, and it's so it's many ways like learning to ride a bike or learning to drive. And when you start off, you have to learn the minimum skills of how you beat match to be able to mix the two records together. And it's really, really difficult when you start off. But then it gets to a point where it suddenly flips to being a subconscious action, and then you just do that naturally, and then you start to you've got the mental capacity then to start to think about, so when am I going to bring the two tracks together? What am I going to be playing 3 tracks after this one? Like planning the journey out. And so then you can, I've done a few gigs at small clubs, and I got to play at one of the bigger clubs in London through a friend many years ago. But I never really pursued it as a career. It would have spoilt it, and there's lots of, how to put it, greasy pole climbing to doing that industry. It's not. We were saying about Formula One being a meritocracy. The entertainment industry on that side is definitely not a meritocracy.
Who you know.
Yeah, exactly. And it would have spoilt it for me in terms of the enjoyment of having to do that to earn a living. And so I've got quite a close circle of friends, and lots of them we know each other through music. I've got one friend who I met through a friend. We were at a house party after we'd been out, and we've both got our record boxes there, and you start looking through the record box and you go, yeah, it's almost identical to mine. Like, so the genre of music that we're into, it's really broad, loads of different producers, loads of different artists, but you're flicking through and you just go, blimey, we've got very similar music taste. And then you kind of sparks off a whole discussion from there.
So here's my next question. So you also race as well. Do you listen to this music when you race?
So I don't. I'm a frustrated racing driver, that's for certain. But so I do track days in cars, which is it's different from racing in that, so you're pushing the car to as the limits as much as you dare on track, but it's not competitive, and they deliberately tell you not to time it. Not that we ever do, honestly, but but it's the doing any kind of racing, be it karting or going through to it's a very expensive hobby. And when you're racing competitively, the chance of having contact with someone or having a big crash and having lots of damage, it's you have to have very deep pockets, or racing in a formula where it's not that expensive if it goes wrong. But so for me, the going and doing the track days in the car, it's a kind of it scratches the itch 90% of the way there, and you still get to go and explore a car to the limits of performance that you can't do safely on the public highway.
Yeah, I do a karting tournament with my son every year, and it's like 7 hours of qualifying, and then they take the top 28 drivers and they have this like knockout qualifying session of races. So just they take the slowest people, and you race, and they take the 4 people off, kick them out. It's a lot like Formula One qualifying, but they're races. After 7 hours of qualifying, I put my earbuds in. I have it low enough to where I can kind of hear what's going on, but man, it certainly kind of motivates you to drive. And I know, like,
I think
anyone would tell you don't do that.
When I'm out there, driving on the track, I've got headphones on, and my car's pretty loud, so I've still got earplugs on, even underneath the headphones. And when it's similar to DJing, you get into that, for me anyway, of getting into that zone of concentration, and it's the focus on doing that thing. It's very different discipline on the DJing versus the driving, but it's that kind of intense laser focus on doing this one thing, and I'm doing it to the best of my abilities at the expense of everything else. But
is it your car?
It is. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough, and one of the nice things about Formula One, it gives you the opportunities to go and do things that if you told me 15 years ago that I'd have the car I've got now, I would have told you you're a liar. It's hard work, but it's generally well enough paid, and you get to go and buy these toys to, if you want to go and enjoy the fruits of your labor.
And did I read that right, that you've driven a Formula One car?
No, not.
Okay.
So in the simulator,
Okay.
on the sim racing side, but I mean, so the level of performance of a Formula One car compared to, so the Lotus that I take on track. I mean, it's a very, very quick road car.
Yeah.
It's fast on a track. It's got a little bit of downforce, but it runs on semi-slick tired, road legal tires, and so you might do, I don't know, more than a half G lateral in the cornering, and F1 cars are 5.5 G, and just the performance of F1's just another level in comparison. And my neck would break. My neck could be done after half a lap in a Formula One car. You have to. What lots of people probably don't appreciate is how fit and strong the drivers have to be. But I've been up in a glider, so so you get towed up by an airplane or off a winch, so no powered flight, backseat passenger, but then a guy towed us up to 10,000 feet, and then you use the altitude to spend it to go and do acrobatics on the way down. We did things like 4G loops and things on the way down there, and that is that'll be the most G-force I've experienced, but it gives you an idea of what the drivers are experiencing.
Over and over and over and over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going from that direction to that direction, braking. And the acceleration in a Formula One car is phenomenal, but it's nothing compared to the cornering or the braking performance.
That is what I've heard. We've got a sim here that we use, my son and I, I just like the race craft. And so I put all of the assists on, and my son's like, Dad, there's going to be a point in your life where you're going to get the opportunity to drive a Formula One car. And if you are always on the assists, you'll never even get it out of first gear. He's like, just take them all off. Let's play. Let's have fun. And then at some point in the next 40 years, you might have an opportunity to do that. You'll know what you're doing and you can have fun. And I was like, okay, I think there's some wisdom there that I can take.
Yeah, I think the simulators now it's the same as we were talking about for both the engineering application side. What you can have as a home simulator now, it's nowhere near the level of what we have for the drivers for in the factory. But they are. I will use my sim rig at home to learn a track before I go and drive it for the first time in my road car, and it teaches you where the braking points are. And now the circuits are laser scanned, so then they've got the bumps that the actual track's got in there. It doesn't replicate the G-forces, all that. You don't get the seat in the pants feedback that you do get in actually driving the car, but being able to go to a track and already know which direction the corner's going, what's the flow of the corners, where am I braking, where am I going to think I'm going to be shifting for the different things. It's just means you get up to speed on the track much quicker and get more value more fun out of the experience when you're there.
Well, I always wrap up my conversations with this question, because you're in the sport, you're around it. On Quora is much like Reddit, it's question answer. And the most common question I always get is, I'm whatever years old and I want to be a Formula One driver, Formula One engineer, Formula One software designer, whatever it is. And I can't answer that question, but I'm like, well, now I'm talking to these people. So if you were going to speak to a young person or answer a question like that, what advice would you give them, or what kind of benchmark is achievable? Because everybody likes the glitz and glam of Formula One, and they want to do it because it looks cool, or it would appear cool. But you have a very specific baseline of what qualities and just what you have to achieve to wear the shirt that you're wearing and sit at the desk that you're sitting at and design the components that go in that car. How would you answer that question?
Yeah, it's
loaded, but
it could be a very short answer, but it can be a very long answer at the same time. And there's, to work in Formula One, there's a massive breadth of different roles, and you're hinting at, you're saying how for some people, they're attracted by the glitz and the glamour, and I think for people who don't understand what design engineering or people who work at the factory is generally about, the question I get most often the time is, do you go to the tracks? Do you get to meet the drivers? And so we send engineers to the track that support the operation of the PU, support the rest of the teams, but it's not glamorous. It's I'm sure the people who do it, they do it because they love it, and some people want to go and do that trackside thing, but lots of people go and do it for a period of time, and then they come back to the factory because it's just relentless and brutal. Now with 23 races per year, it's not far off what it was like previously when it was less races, but people were testing in terms of the amount of time people are away from home, and so that and for the people who are flying, it's not the drivers, not the team principals. They're flying in business class, economy class, it's all around the different places around the world, same as you would be if you're going on a holiday or visiting somewhere. And it can be right, arrive at the circuit, or get from the plane, get off the plane, get to the hotel, out the hotel to the circuit, and they don't always even get to see some of the country that they're in. But that's, at the same time, it is really cool. I think it's not a role that I've done, and it's I'd be interested to try it, but it's never been my particular real desire or passion to go and do that. My area has always been the designing items, being able to have explained it to someone who again doesn't understand engineering so much or Formula One, is I get to play with really, really expensive Lego, and I get to design what the Lego bricks look like. It's that. And so kind of coming back to your question, it's being sure or trying to work out where your passion is. What's your niche, or what's the area that you're gonna excel in? Because if you're working in that area, it's not a job. You're getting paid to do a hobby, and to do the things that make you go the extra mile, that make you stand out from the other candidates, or make you do better in your performance reviews, that you're more likely to progress through the company quicker than other people. If you're in that area that you're doing it because it's a passion, you're loving it, then that natural energy levels and dedication, everything that you've got will come. But finding out what that area is in your choices in education and everything else, in many ways you're forced to choose too soon. But I guess pursue your dreams, have a good idea what your dream is, and then you can, so like you've done for reaching out to the likes of me for people to come and talk on the podcast, I think you've been surprised by the number of people who are willing to offer guidance and support. And so you might have an idea that I want to work in this area, in this industry. Now with the internet, you can go and find examples of people like that, go and contact them, ask them for some advice. But in general terms, as someone who actively recruits, and I've done that both in at Flybrid before and on the Mercedes side, it's a mixture of, you need to have the right qualifications, but we want the best of the best. And so there's some universities are better than others for certain subjects on the engineering side. And then if I got two CVs and you're looking at and you're going, this person got a first, that person got a 2-1. A 2-1's not a bad degree score, but the person who got a first, why did they get a first? And so you still look at the rest of it, and you're looking down and going, okay, there might be some differentiating factors, but you want to get the right education from an institution that's well regarded for your chosen profession, and make sure that you yeah, you do as well as you possibly can. Not everyone's going to get a first. If you still get a 2-1 grade, that's not bad. You can still go on and have a great career, but just make sure that when you look back, you won't have any regrets and went, oh, if I just revised that a little bit more, gone to that one party, one extra party. It's striking the balance and making sure you're spending the effort to get the qualifications that you'll need. But then, as we touched on in some of the earlier conversation, it's not just about the piece of paper on the degree. It's about demonstrating that you've got the passion and enthusiasm for your chosen area. What are all the extracurricular things that you've done? What practical experience can you bring to it? Bring to the role, and what's going to mean that you're going to have a head start compared to other applicants. And so whether it's doing free work experience, or if it's in engineering, buying a wrecker of a car, and just taking it apart, trying to fix it, trying to get it to work again, or so you understand how things work. There's in the software side of things in IT, the equivalent is, I mean, now kids start to code at such a young age.
Yeah.
I suppose that's another important thing, kind of separate from F1 side, is the world's changing so fast. Is be sure that the area you're going into is got a good chance of still being around in 15, 20 years.
Well, let's hope that Formula One's around in 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, I hope so. It needs to get me through to my retirement at least.
Well, Dan, seriously, thank you so much for coming on. I honestly, I'm so thankful that you came on, and it's such good information, because I get private messages on Quora and social media channels, and I get a lot of, when I'm at the track, I have young people asking me, how they get into the sport, and really having people from the sport be so supportive to come on here and tell their story. It's Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, whatever it is such a big, intimidating thing to some people, that they just get overwhelmed by the glitz and the glam of the sport, and they don't know where to go with it. And providing stories, I mean, just as you said, on the technical side, it's this like respectful, relentless pursuit of the role that you want. And then more on the creative side is really get creative with the way that you connect. I had a young guy on Seb Hawkins a couple of weeks ago from Williams Esports. He sent a social media response to the head of esports for Williams, and the guy responded back in a private message, and now he's basically the team manager for their esports team from a social media post. I think stories like that help kind of draw it down and say, Formula One is just a company with people no different than you and I. Now they're at the highest levels. The meritocracy does exist. But, if you have that passion, I think that's the difference between skill set and, and achieving that passion gets you to that level to.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we said, it's a high performance industry and a profession, and the bar to entry is high. But if you have the skills, you demonstrate the willingness. We take, as you said, total meritocracy. We just want the best engineers to develop the best power unit and go as fast as possible in the most reliable way. And so we are constantly always looking to try and increase the diversity of the applicants coming into the business. And so people, if Formula One is inclusive for all, if you've got the right skills and experience to get in there. And there's through the likes of Formula Student and Formula SAE, other initiatives, there's those stepping stones along the way, and you're in your stages of your career to give you the best chance of getting through. But I'd also say, don't give up. So I I had the kind of reflection on myself of, if I had gone through the graduate interview that we put grads through when I'd finished university, I wouldn't have got I wouldn't have got in at that stage. No, it took me going and getting the additional professional experience that I had on the other stages of my career to be able to get to a level where I was good enough. I definitely wouldn't. I think I would have got close, but the standard of the people who come through as graduate intake at HPP now are way above where I was when I finished my degree.
The grit and the fortitude that you develop in a startup, I to me, I think is the sizzle on the steak of the role that you're in today.
Yeah, I mean, so the I've worked in large corporations, and then the startup, and then a mixture of the two. And the HPP as part of Mercedes is an ideal mix of both. You're part of a large multinational corporation, but it's still a relatively small business focused on just doing primarily producing Formula One engines. So it's an ideal mix of both. But for people in the early stages of their career, if the right opportunity comes along at the right startup, grab it with both hands, because you get to learn so quickly, and you do more than just whatever your role is. So I was design engineer, but occasional purchasing, occasional doing marketing, and you just and getting to see how a successful product is developed, and everything that goes around it. When it's that small startup, you just see you learn so much more. But there's also advantages being the part of big businesses as well. Generally the pay is better to start off with in a big business, but the opportunities to progress it's slower, and you don't get the same rapid pace of learning. So always pros and cons with everything, but having been through the experience of being fortunate to the number of startup companies that aren't successful versus those that are successful is to have started that ride on that ride of that journey with that company from the start to where it got to when I hopped off. Very fortunate to have had that experience. But I can also look back and say, a large part of that company's success was due to the blood, sweat, and tears that I put in there. So it goes both ways.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Dan, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. You're welcome anytime. You want to come on and talk about whatever, you shoot me a message. I love these conversations.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. I think as you found with lots of people, I think you're talking to, it's not normal when they realize that we're doing something like with the jobs that we're doing, but it's the day-to-day for us. And so kind of pausing, chance to talk about it. It is a little bit humbling as well on that side, but it's also having the chance to spread the word, and anything we can do to help people who've got those dreams and that passion to if it helps one or two people get over the line and working in Formula One or wherever they want to get to, then fantastic.
I totally agree. Dan, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Cheers. Thanks very much. Good night.
Good night.